For 5 centuries the Lethari believed war had vanished from the galaxy. Their civilization ruled a quiet region of space known as the Council Systems, a cluster of prosperous star systems connected by diplomacy, trade, and mutual protection treaties. Conflicts were settled through negotiation chambers rather than battlefields. Weapons existed only as ceremonial relics stored in museums and archives. Among the Lethari, the idea of large-scale warfare felt distant and primitive, something practiced by ancient species before civilization matured. Their historians, however, remembered a darker era. Deep within the Council archives existed records of a time known only as the Burning Age. It was a period when entire star systems had been reduced to drifting fields of wreckage and radiation. Empires rose and collapsed within decades, and the galaxy had nearly destroyed itself through endless wars. Most of those wars had ended the same way. Humans. The records described humanity as a young but terrifying species, strategists capable of adapting faster than any known civilization. When confronted with threats, humans escalated conflicts with relentless efficiency until their enemies were no longer capable of fighting at all. They did not simply defeat opponents. They erased the possibility of those opponents ever becoming threats again. Entire battle fleets had disappeared during human campaigns. Enemy capitals were surrounded and dismantled with surgical precision. Even powerful warlike species had learned to fear the moment human fleets entered a system. And then, centuries ago, humanity vanished from the galactic core. After the last great conflict ended, human territories withdrew toward the distant frontier regions. They rarely interacted with the Council species again. Trade became rare. Diplomatic visits even rarer. Over generations, the stories faded. Many Lethari scholars began questioning whether the old records had been exaggerated. Some believed historians had inflated human reputation simply to dramatize the violent past. After all, no one had seen a human war fleet in centuries. The galaxy had changed. Civilization had matured. War was no longer necessary. That belief held strong until the day the observatories detected the fleet. It began as a faint gravitational disturbance at the far edge of Lethari's sensor range. At first, astronomers assumed it was a natural phenomenon, perhaps a cluster of cometary bodies or a drifting asteroid field. Then the signals resolved into formation patterns. Ships. Not a handful. Hundreds. The Lethari sensor network immediately expanded its scans, focusing deep into the outer system where the objects were emerging from interstellar space. What they saw caused the observatory command staff to fall silent. Massive vessels arranged in tight formations were advancing toward Council territory with unmistakable precision. Their hull designs matched known alien architecture within the central regions of the galaxy. But they did match something else. Ancient archival images stored in restricted historical databases. Human warships. Within minutes, emergency reports reached the Lethari Council. Military analysts, few as they were, studied the incoming fleet signatures with growing unease. These were not merchant convoys or exploratory expeditions. The ships were war vessels. Dreadnoughts the size of orbital stations. Heavy carriers surrounded by defensive escorts. Strike cruisers arranged in disciplined formations. Every vessel moving with synchronized precision. Even more unsettling was their trajectory. They were not drifting cautiously toward Lethari space. They were accelerating directly toward it. Panic began spreading through Council leadership. The Lethari had never fought a war with humanity. Their civilizations had rarely even interacted. There was no known dispute, no border conflict, no political tension that could explain such an approach. Which meant the only rational response was immediate diplomacy. Transmission arrays across multiple systems activated simultaneously. The first message was formal and respectful. Human fleet approaching Council space, this region is governed by the Lethari Alliance. We welcome peaceful contact and request clarification of your intentions. No response came. Minutes passed. The fleet continued advancing. The Council transmitted again. This time the message was more direct. We confirm the presence of human military vessels entering our territory. The Council systems maintain strict neutrality in all external conflicts. Please identify your purpose and destination. Still nothing. Not a single acknowledgement. The silence unsettled the Ledhari leadership more than any hostile reply could have. Human ships did not change formation. They did not slow. They did not alter course. They continued advancing deeper toward the outer colonies. Sensor stations began tracking the fleet in greater detail. Every new scan revealed additional vessels emerging behind the first wave. The fleet was far larger than originally believed. Not hundreds of ships. Thousands. An armada moving with cold efficiency through interstellar space. Council diplomats attempted a different strategy. They transmitted assurances of cooperation. If your fleet requires supplies or navigation assistance, the Council systems are prepared to assist. Still no answer. The fleet pressed forward. Across Ledhari space, civilian networks began receiving news updates about the approaching human force. Fear spread quickly through populations that had never experienced war. People searched historical archives. They read the ancient records their ancestors had preserved. The stories were not comforting. They described battles where human fleets surrounded entire enemy armadas and dismantled them piece by piece. They spoke of campaigns that ended centuries-long conflicts in a matter of weeks. Every account repeated the same disturbing pattern. Humans did not retreat once they committed to a battle. They did not stop once an enemy was defeated. They pursued threats until those threats could never rise again. Within the council chambers, anxiety deepened. Why were humans entering their territory with such overwhelming force? Had the council unknowingly offended them? Had some unknown event triggered a conflict no one understood? Desperate to avoid catastrophe, the Ledhari sent another broadcast. This one carried a tone rarely used in galactic diplomacy. Human fleet, the Council systems request immediate communication. We assure you we pose no threat. Our territory remains neutral. We ask only that you clarify your intentions. Again the answer was silence. Long-range sensors began detecting the first gravitational distortions created by the fleet's engine wakes as the armada crossed into the outer boundary of Council space. The humans had officially entered Ledhari territory, and they showed no sign of stopping. Ledhari intelligence networks activated across every Council world the moment the human fleet crossed their territorial boundary. What began as fear quickly became confusion. Human fleets did not move randomly. Historical records described them as calculating and deliberate. Every deployment had a clear objective. Yet the trajectory of the approaching armada made little sense. The ships were not targeting population centers or trade stations. They ignored major colonies entirely as they moved deeper into Ledhari space. Instead, their course pointed toward a relatively quiet outer region containing only a few mining systems and long-distance shipping routes. Council analysts began examining sensor data again, this time looking for something they might have missed. The discovery came from a small surveillance outpost orbiting a distant gas giant. The station reported faint drive signatures within a nearby asteroid field, ships hiding among drifting rock formations. At first the signals appeared insignificant. But when the data was processed through military classification archives, the pattern matched a known fleet configuration. The vessels belonged to the Carthan Dominion. The Carthan were one of the few aggressive powers still operating beyond the Council systems. Their empire had expanded rapidly through conquest along the outer trade corridors. Entire frontier colonies had vanished during their campaigns. Worlds that resisted them often ended up stripped of resources and population alike. The Dominion rarely attacked Council territory directly. The Ledhari alliance was too large and politically connected to provoke easily. Instead, Carthan fleets typically avoided the region entirely, which made their presence inside Ledhari space deeply suspicious. Further scans revealed the scale of the hidden force. Dozens of heavy warships. Carrier vessels surrounded by escort cruisers. A full Dominion strike fleet concealed within the asteroid field. Council officials quickly contacted the outpost again, requesting confirmation that the Carthan ships had entered the system legally. The answer was worse than expected. The fleet had slipped into Council territory weeks earlier, traveling alongside civilian shipping convoys to avoid attention. Once inside the system, they powered down most active signatures and drifted quietly among the asteroids. They had been hiding. That realization forced Council strategists to confront an alarming possibility. The human fleet was not invading Lethari space. It was hunting. The Dominion had attacked many species over the years, but intelligence reports revealed something far more dangerous. Several months earlier, the Carthan had raided a remote human colony along the frontier. The attack had been swift and brutal. Orbital bombardments destroyed the settlement's infrastructure before evacuation ships could launch. Survivors were captured or killed within hours. Human communications from the frontier went silent shortly afterward. No diplomatic protest followed. No official complaint was filed with the galactic community. For weeks the attack seemed to have gone unanswered. Until now. Council analysts compared the timeline of events. The Dominion fleet had entered Lethari territory shortly after the colony raid. The human fleet appeared only days ago. Which meant humanity had tracked the Carthan across half the galaxy. And now they had finally caught them. The implications chilled the Council chamber. Humans were not entering their space to threaten the Lethari. They were pursuing an enemy. But that offered little comfort. History recorded what happened when humans pursued someone. They did not pause for diplomatic procedure. They did not negotiate borders. They finished what had begun. The Council issued urgent warnings to the Dominion fleet hiding within the asteroid belt. Carthan command vessels, you are currently harboring inside protected Council territory. We have detected a human fleet entering this region. For your own safety and ours, you must leave immediately. The Dominion response came minutes later. Confident. Dismissive. Their commanders claimed they had done nothing illegal and had every right to remain in neutral space. The humans, they argued, would not dare violate Council territory with open aggression. The Carthan believed the Lethari would force humanity to respect diplomatic boundaries. Council leadership did not share that optimism. They attempted one more broadcast toward the approaching human fleet. This is the Lethari Council. A Dominion fleet has been located within our territory. We are ordering their withdrawal. We request that human forces halt their advance and allow us to resolve this situation peacefully. Again, the human armada remained silent. Sensors tracked their movement with growing dread. The fleet was no longer simply traveling through the system. Its formations were shifting. Attack groups began separating into multiple vectors, spreading across possible escape routes surrounding the asteroid field. They were positioning themselves, preparing for battle. Panic spread across Lethari communications channels. Council diplomats sent increasingly urgent messages. Human fleet, please respond. This conflict can still be resolved without violence. Human command, we request immediate dialogue. We ask you to respect Council neutrality. None of the transmissions received any acknowledgement. Meanwhile, Dominion commanders still refused to retreat. They believed the humans would eventually slow down. They believed diplomacy would intervene. They believed the Council would protect them. The Lethari historians watching the sensor feeds knew better. Ancient records contained a warning repeated by every civilization that had ever fought humanity. When humans pursue an enemy, distance does not matter. Borders do not matter. Neutral territory does not matter. Only the outcome matters. Across Lethari space, the Council began broadcasting a final message toward the human fleet. Not a demand. Not a diplomatic request. A plea. They begged the humans to stop before battle began. But the Armada continued moving forward in absolute silence. The human fleet reached the outer mining system without slowing. By the time their ships crossed the final orbital boundary, every sensor array in Lethari space was focused on the same region. Civilian communication networks carried live telemetry from observatories, and billions of Lethari watched in uneasy silence. The asteroid field where the Carthan Dominion fleet hid stretched across millions of kilometers. Jagged rock formations drifted slowly through the system, creating natural cover for any vessel trying to avoid detection. The Dominion ships had chosen their hiding place well. But the moment the human armada entered the system, their advantage vanished. Human vessels separated into organized combat formations with mechanical precision. Massive carriers moved toward the outer edges of the asteroid belt, while strike cruisers formed spearhead groups aimed directly into the densest regions of debris. Nothing about their movements looked hesitant. They were not searching. They already knew exactly where their enemy was. Dominion commanders quickly realized the same thing. Their hidden fleet powered up engines and weapons simultaneously, abandoning stealth in favor of survival. Heavy cruisers ignited shields while carrier vessels began launching fighter squadrons into defensive formations. The Carthan had expected diplomacy to slow the humans down. Instead, they were facing a full assault. The first strike arrived without warning. From extreme range, human dreadnoughts launched kinetic projectiles accelerated to impossible velocities. The rounds crossed the distance between fleets in seconds. Several Dominion warships were crippled instantly. Armor plates shattered. Engines detonated. One cruiser split apart before its shields could even activate. Panic spread through the Carthan formation. They attempted to reposition their fleet, pushing outward from the asteroid belt toward open space where their larger ships could maneuver. The humans anticipated the move. Strike cruisers surged forward from multiple directions, cutting off escape routes before the Dominion fleet could regroup. Thousands of autonomous drones poured from launch bays, weaving through the drifting asteroids like swarms of metallic predators. Each drone targeted specific systems: engines, weapons, communication arrays. Within moments, several Dominion vessels lost propulsion entirely, left drifting helplessly while human ships closed the distance. The Carthan attempted a counterattack. Their carrier groups released waves of fighters armed with plasma torpedoes, hoping to overwhelm the approaching human cruisers through sheer numbers. The strategy failed immediately. Human defense grids activated with ruthless efficiency. Laser batteries tracked the incoming fighters with machine precision, cutting through entire squadrons before they could even approach firing range. Missile interceptors eliminated the remaining craft within seconds. The battle was not unfolding the way the Dominion expected. Their fleet had fought countless campaigns across frontier space. They were accustomed to chaotic engagements where both sides suffered heavy losses over hours or even days. What they faced now was different. Human ships moved like parts of a single coordinated machine. Every maneuver supported another maneuver. Every weapon strike exposed weaknesses for the next. Within minutes, the Dominion formation began collapsing. Two heavy carriers attempted emergency jumps out of the system, but the human fleet had already anticipated that possibility. Specialized interdiction ships activated gravitational disruptors that locked the carriers in place before their drives could stabilize. The trapped vessels became easy targets. Concentrated railgun volleys tore through their hulls until both ships disintegrated in expanding clouds of debris. Across the system, Ledhari observers watched the battle with growing horror. They had expected a conflict. What they witnessed was systematic destruction. Human ships ignored disabled Dominion vessels unless they attempted to reactivate weapons. Their focus remained on eliminating every remaining threat in the fleet with calculated efficiency. Half the Dominion warships were gone within 15 minutes. Those that survived attempted desperate retreats through the asteroid belt, scattering in different directions to increase their chances of escape. Human pursuit groups followed immediately. Their cruisers navigated the chaotic terrain effortlessly, firing precision shots that disabled fleeing ships one after another. Eventually, the Dominion command vessel broadcast a surrender signal. The transmission was sent across every frequency available. The Carthan offered to cease hostilities. They offered to withdraw. They even offered reparations. For the first time since entering Ledhari territory, humanity finally responded. A single message transmitted from the lead human dreadnought. The signal spread across the entire system so every observer could hear it. "You attacked a human colony. There will be no negotiation." After that message ended, the battle continued. Human ships closed in on the remaining Dominion vessels with the same cold efficiency they had shown from the beginning. One by one, the final warships were destroyed. Some detonated violently under concentrated bombardment. Others were sliced apart by sustained railgun fire. A few drifted silently after their reactors failed, only to be finished moments later by precise follow-up strikes. Less than 30 minutes after the first shot was fired, the battle was over. The asteroid field was no longer a hiding place. It had become a graveyard. Fragments of Dominion warships floated slowly among the drifting rocks, surrounded by silent human vessels holding position across the system. Not a single Carthan warship had survived. For several long minutes after the battle ended, no one in Lethari space spoke. Sensor arrays across the Council systems continued scanning the shattered battlefield, confirming the same impossible result again and again. The Dominion fleet was gone. Where dozens of powerful warships had hidden only an hour earlier, there were now drifting fragments of hull metal and frozen clouds of debris slowly spreading through the asteroid field. Human vessels remained in position throughout the system. Their formations were still perfectly organized, engines idling quietly as if the destruction that had just taken place required no effort at all. Across the Council worlds, fear replaced the earlier panic. The Lethari had begged the humans not to come. They had pleaded for diplomacy. They had offered neutrality and cooperation. None of it had mattered. The humans had entered their territory, fought their battle, and destroyed an entire fleet without once acknowledging the Council. Within the central chambers of Lethari leadership, emergency protocols began preparing for the worst. If humanity now decided the Council systems had interfered with their operation, or if they simply chose to remain, there would be nothing the Lethari could do to stop them. The Council's fleets were designed for patrol and defense against pirates, not for confronting the kind of military power humanity had just demonstrated. Evacuation contingencies were quietly discussed. Colony governors requested instructions. Every civilization within the Alliance waited for the humans to make their next move. For several tense minutes, nothing happened. Then one vessel broke formation. It was not one of the massive dreadnoughts or heavily armored carriers. Instead, a smaller ship moved away from the main fleet and began traveling toward the nearest Lethari command station orbiting the system's outer planet. Its approach was calm and deliberate. Moments later, a communication request appeared across the Council network. For the first time since the human armada had been detected, the fleet opened a channel. Council leaders accepted the transmission immediately. The image that appeared was not threatening. A human officer stood within a dimly lit command deck, calm and composed. His voice carried none of the aggression the Lethari had feared. Lethari Council, this is Commander Elias Ward of the United Earth Defense Fleet. We acknowledge that our pursuit operation entered your territory without prior authorization. The Council chamber remained silent as the human continued. We regret the violation of your borders. However, the Dominion fleet destroyed a civilian human colony 3 months ago. Orbital bombardment eliminated the settlement before evacuation was possible. Millions of our people died. The words were delivered without anger, but their meaning carried unmistakable weight. When an attack of that scale occurs, human law requires a single response. The responsible force must be neutralized completely. Several council delegates attempted to speak, but the commander continued before they could interrupt. The fleet hiding in your system was responsible. Our mission was to locate them and ensure they could not repeat that action anywhere else. The human paused briefly before adding the final statement. Your worlds were never our target. Across the chamber, Lethari officials exchanged uneasy looks. Everything the historians had recorded suddenly made sense. Humans did not wage wars for territory or conquest. They fought to eliminate threats permanently. Commander Ward continued speaking. Our fleet will depart your territory immediately. We thank the Council for maintaining stability in this region of space. One of the senior Lethari delegates finally found the courage to respond. You ignored every message we sent. We pleaded for negotiation. Why did you not answer? For the first time, the human commander hesitated. Then he answered with quiet honesty. Because the outcome had already been decided the moment our colony was attacked. The communication channel closed shortly afterward. Across the system, human ships began moving again. The massive armada reorganized into travel formations, engines igniting as the fleet prepared to leave Lethari territory. Within minutes, the first ships jumped into interstellar space. Then the next. And the next. Until the final vessel vanished into the darkness between stars. Silence returned to the asteroid field. The debris of the Dominion fleet continued drifting slowly through the system, the only evidence that a battle had taken place. Inside the Council archives, historians quietly updated the ancient records. The stories of human warfare had never been exaggerations. They had been warnings. Across the galaxy, civilizations often prayed they would never see a human war fleet approaching their worlds. Because when humans arrived in pursuit of an enemy, the war was already over.